Welcome everybody to the Dope Interview Series. My name is Warren Shaw, and today we are joined by film writer, director extraordinaire, Jessica Kavana Dornbush to discuss her new film, Reefa. Jessica, how the hell are you?
I am doing well. How are you?
Doing good, and even a little bit better after seeing your masterpiece in film. I am by trade a Miami native, if you will, South Florida, Fort Lauderdale to be exact. Born in New York, but lived down here in the Florida area all my life, and to see this story kind of come to fruition was very eye-opening and very telling, and it hit home, especially as somebody who lives in the area and seeing the familiarity of some of the spaces and things of that nature as well too. But I don't want to get into that just right now. I want you to talk about that. So my first question for you is just, how'd you get into filmmaking?
I took a film class in college. I was studying international relations. I had always loved movies, was the person that always quoted every movie as part of making my point in a conversation. And really kind of just fell into it and fell in love with it and have been working in film ever since. I mean, and I don't want to give away my age, but that was a long time ago.
Don't have to give away your age, but what was your first job in film? What was the first thing you had to do?
I was actually a production assistant, and that is a very nice word for what I actually was, to Talia, the famous Mexican singer.
Awesome.
Yeah, so I was her girl. I did everything and just started there and kind of went up the ladder from there for many years in New York and independent film, and then came down to Miami and started filmmaking here as well.
Outstanding. So set the stage for us. In your words, as somebody who researched it, wrote it, directed it, et cetera, what is this film Reefa about?
I haven't actually been asked that question yet. Funny enough, you took me aback. Reefa, I mean, in its entirety, is the story of Israel Hernandez, whose artist name was Reefa, and it's the summer after he graduates high school. And most of the film takes place over that summer where he falls in love for the first time. He spends the summer skateboarding and hanging out with his friends, creating art. He was very involved in the Miami art scene, especially the graffiti scene, spends time with his family. And unfortunately, as everybody knows, gets stopped by a police officer for doing an illegal graffiti and ultimately gets killed because of it.
So there's a lot, in my opinion, to kind of break down into this film, in terms of the casting, the story itself. But let's start kind of maybe even a little bit more of the inception. What made you want to do a film about this, this tragedy, really?
It came to me. There was a producer at the time who had been working on Israel's story at a local news station. And he was also involved in films, and he came to me and he said, I think you need to write this story as a film. And I was a little hesitant. Fruitville Station had just come out and it touched upon similar themes. So it wasn't until really I met with Israel's family and his friends, and I started falling in love with the story of his life and not just the story of his death, that I knew it was a story I wanted to tell.
I love what you said there, Jessica. Really, it's like the story of his life. I think people, quote unquote, get the flowers after they're gone, right? But there's the way the story is depicted, it really does tell you how he lived. Did he make some mistakes? Sure, as all teens and people do, right? But at the heart, he was a good kid coming from a great family as well, too, hardworking family. Yeah. So what was it like talking to them about wanting to make this into a film? How did the family receive it? And kind of what tips did they give you throughout the process?
It was not an easy process. I'm not sure I would do that again. I didn't really realize the weight, that the responsibility I was going to feel towards this family day in and day out of the entire process, from raising the money to the financing collapsing several times. It's one thing when financing collapses and you're just making your own movie and it's kind of part of the hits that you have to take. Another thing is when you have to report those hits to a family who every time makes it feel as if their story doesn't have value, because somebody is not interested in telling that story at that particular moment, which isn't really the case, but that's how it feels on a personal level. And then once I started working with them, it was only not even a year after Israel had passed away. So it was still very fresh. So it took a while. It took a bit for people to trust me and open up and really be able to tell the story of Israel the way that he was, and not just through rose-colored glasses, which is, kind of what tends to happen, especially close to someone's dying,
Yeah. Yeah. How long, in essence, has it taken to get the story to the point where it's a film now? So how many years have you been working on it?
Well, it took 5 years to get it off the ground. Literally 5 years of it coming together and falling apart, just over and over again. It was really tough. It was really, really heartbreaking. We as a team, we had many lows where, I asked people to please put other jobs on hold that we thought we had the money, and then it would fall apart. It was tough, but we all really wanted to tell the story. And then we shot it in June of last year. In June 2019. And then we were supposed to premiere March 12th, 2020, as the world got shut down. So here we are 1 year later, and the film is finally coming out. So 7 years total since I started working on it.
That's crazy. Well, congratulations for sticking through it, really and truly. And, for the family as well, too, sticking by you to tell the story in the way that it did. So, we're going to jump around here a little bit, I guess, because you just brought up a really interesting point that I think kind of captured on the film: timing.
Yeah.
So the timing of it now kind of coincides into a very unique time in our world where police brutality and, the disproportionate kind of for lack of a better phrase, racism and a lot of things that they say just that happened to Black and brown people. But this is a very unique story in that of itself too, because the officer in the film is of Hispanic descent as well too, but still police brutality. So just talk about the serendipity of all of that in some ways, where now this story is being told at a time where it may even get even more attention based on kind of where the world is at.
I think so. I'm not sure about that. I don't know if it's going to be a double-edged sword. I'm hoping that it's what you're saying. I'm hoping that, look, when we started the film, one of the reasons that I really wanted to tell the story is I did want to shift the conversation from, it only happening, like African-American stories that had been so beautifully told in this context, to Hispanic stories that weren't being told. And this was happening, almost as frequently to brown kids as it was happening to Black kids. And I thought it was an important story to tell. And just like you're saying, the fact that it was also a Latino cop who perpetrated the crime, I thought was even more intriguing about the story. But I guess we'll see. I mean, I'm hoping that it is a good moment, that people want to see the story and realize that it is time to keep having these conversations and really take the conversations to a different level. But I don't know if people are burnt out from seeing so much of this on the news and won't want to see it. So hopefully the message gets out that the film is about a beautiful life. It's about so much more than just the way that his life ends, I don't know. I guess we'll see.
Yeah, it is crazy. And I think you do bring up a good point, because there is the fatigue. Right now we have a trial going on, with the Floyd murder, if you will. And just, people, again, like you said, like it's not they don't care. It's just they don't have the energy, to kind of get there, as you alluded to. But I think from a local standpoint as well, like there's just so much that you can dig into, with this film, and I kind of wanted to ask you about the overall arching and framing of, the city and making sure that you're able to utilize, spaces that really are representative, because a lot of times you'll get, I'm going to use probably the wrong terminology, but quote unquote demographic pieces, if you will, that are portrayed, they'll try to portray a place in Europe and they actually shot in Atlanta or something like that, right? How important was that to be in Miami and Wynwood and places like that for you to help tell the story?
Yeah, no, it was incredibly important. I mean, Florida lost its tax incentive several years back. So it's more expensive to film in Florida than it would be to film it in Atlanta, that has a 30% tax rebate. So our desire to film on the streets where it happened was strong, and we did think it was going to pay off ultimately. both visually and financially. I mean, from a financial perspective, it did pay off in the sense that there's a lot of money on the screen that wasn't in the budget, and it happened because it was a community story and people opened up their stores and their streets and their extras and their friends to us, and that wouldn't have happened somewhere else. From a visual perspective, there's so much texture in the streets of Miami that isn't usually shown, and all of us were locals on the set, and we wanted to make sure that we really brought that local feeling of the streets that we grew up on into the film.
Very well said. And you talked about being a local aspect. You do have some great actors and actresses in this space. How was the casting process? How involved were you in that as well too? And of the actors that are portrayed in the film, how many of them are quote unquote Miami?
Quite a bit. The two leads are not from Miami. Tyler and Clara come from New York originally. And the parents and the police officer also. Sorry, I have they're cutting the grass right now.
This is live, right?
This is live. I mean, welcome to Zoom world. But yeah, the rest of the cast was all made up of Miami actors, local actors. And it was really important for me to bring a local feel and a real feel as far as the young kids into it, because look, I'm nowhere near cool enough to write the way an 18-year-old speaks. So I wanted to cast actors that were going to bring their own isms into the film. And for example, with Tyler, with our lead, I cast him, and after I cast him, we spent I think over a month every day on FaceTime, going through the script line by line and making Israel a little more Tyler and Tyler a little more Israel. And I pretty much stayed out of that. I mean, I think that my script served as a guideline. I knew where we needed to go, but I really wanted the words to be their own.
I think that's a great call on your point, because as I watched it, I remember just as a lot of the teens, and Israel and his friends are talking, they're talking like how teens talk. Sometimes vile, sometimes vulgar for the parental ears, if you will. But we know what our kids are doing, kind of, because we were kids once too, and we talked a certain kind of way as well. So I think there was a true authenticity to that space, when, especially in some of those moments when they were just kicking it, playing video games, drinking, the whole
exactly, 100%. I mean, and even sorry,
it's all good.
Cynthia, that plays Israel's sister Ophir, and she's originally from Miami. So I actually met her when I was doing castings in LA, but she's a Miami girl. And in the scene where they're sitting on the stoops and she walks away and she's like, why are you always clowning me? I mean, that by no means is in the script. And the minute she said it, we all died laughing, and I knew that had to stay in there.
So she was off camera when she said that, right? I remember that part, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it was funny.
Nah, great call on your part there. So how much did you learn about the graffiti culture, doing this, and how much did Tyler as an actor have to learn about this as well? I mean, I guess he had to learn a great deal, but how much of that, what I mean? And even bringing in some of the people who do this still right now in Wynwood in the Miami area.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Tyler actually was a really talented artist himself. So we thought we were going to have to use Israel's friends who are also artists and use their hands to kind of fake certain pieces. But Tyler was able to do it all. He was able to create Reefa's tag. He was able to create Reefa's flower. And all the art is Tyler. Yeah, I learned a lot more than I ever thought I was going to learn. And I really fell in love with the world of graffiti and the world of street art, and just understanding their movement and understanding the reason why they do what they do, and why they need sometimes to use that as their voice. I thought was just a lovely thing to learn about. And yeah, like you said, I mean, we went to all original Miami street artists and got them in the film. And we went to their store, which is 004. It's in Wynwood, and it's where all the graffiti artists that come from all over the world get their supplies when it's time for Art Basel. So yeah, I mean, we wanted to keep it as local and as legit as possible.
You definitely did that. So I got to ask you this: did you get a chance to try your own hand, at a little street art and graffiti?
Oh God, I have zero talent. I couldn't draw a straight line if I needed to.
Well, let's frame it another way. If you could, what would you, what building, number one, what building would you tag? And then, what would be the art that you create?
Probably the Miami Beach Police Station. I don't know. I'd guess I'd try to maybe write a list of names of people that have been affected that haven't been prosecuted.
Oh man,
Yeah.
that's beautiful. That truly is. So before we let you get out of here, just what do you want people to feel, coming from this? And if I can share my own story with it, as well too. So I was familiar with it before watching it. Didn't tell my family; they were not familiar with it. And I mean, you may take this one way or the other, but my daughter, she looked and she's watching it and she's like, okay, it's a pretty good movie, so forth and so forth. And then it ends how it ends, and she's bawling. Yeah. Why'd you make me watch this? I was like, well, I mean, it's a real story, and she to that point, she didn't know that it was based on a true story. Right. So to me, it runs through the gamut of emotions, right? You have the familiar aspect, you have the first love aspect, you have your buddies, you have obviously the police brutality, and even the police, they have the story. They, in the conversations, he's trying to clean up the city. Yeah. Right? So he feels in that moment he's doing what is right. But again, just what do you want people to feel out of this whole thing? Once they get a chance to view it and review it.
I mean, I think that undoubtedly they'll feel the injustice of the situation, but I hope they feel empathetic to immigrant families and understand the stresses and the pressures that they go through in order to run from a place they call home to save their kids' lives here. Unfortunately, in this case, the life was cut short by those sworn to protect. But I hope they feel what it's like to be a teenager again and a kid when all you have is passion and dreams and you don't really have a care in the world. I mean, for better, for worse. And I hope they feel what it's like to have a first love again. So that's where I tried to guide the film.
I think you did a great job. So really last one before I let you get out of here, what's next? What can we see from your shop coming, in the future, or what would you like to work on potentially? Would it be, I know you said this story was difficult to tell, but something similar in terms of a documentary or something of it based on something based on a true story, or kind of going off into a whole nother direction.
Hopefully, big, broad comedy.
Lighten the mood, right?
I have a couple other films that are written, and hopefully we'll get into production soon. But let's let this the rest of the world settle down a little bit, and hopefully we can get into production without masks on, and with the creative freedoms that we're used to.
Well, thank you so much, Jessica, for joining us. This has been another dope interview with Jessica Kavana Dornbush. Make sure you go see the film Reefa. It is a heart-wrenching but great story told by Jessica and her team. Make sure you check that out. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Warren. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thank you.